Hello, Joni Rotten here. I came across, I was listening to this video. I found it really interesting. Actually, there's a few points in it that I'd like to look at, but this one I'm going to stop here and share this. He's talking about the elongated skulls, and he's looking at it from, a critical mind. And he mentions a couple interesting things here. So I'm going to play this little segment, and then I'm going to read a couple articles that I found to give an example of why, and what is happening, and what I think is happening, and why this happens. So yeah, I'll play this.
Another interesting and extremely bizarre phenomena which we may want to consider is that of cranial deformations found in ancient skeletal remains. Elongated skulls can be found throughout virtually all parts of the world and predate all recorded human history. Examples from Australia and modern-day Iraq are believed to date back to the Proto-Neolithic period, some 10 to 12,000 years before the present, thus potentially being even older than the infamous Göbekli Tepe. So, of course, ancient aliens theorists absolutely love this phenomena, as for them, these skulls suggest some sort of extraterrestrial intervention in human history. DNA evidence, however, has yet to produce anything other than evidence that these skulls were indeed human. As with the case of seemingly inexplicable megalithic architecture, I think that a genuine explanation could be something much less science fiction, but something which nonetheless may be significantly more profound. Some of these remains clearly indicate that the skulls were deformed by intentional binding. In fact, such practices have continued throughout human history and even remain in practice in certain parts of the world to this day. If we look to the cultures that have actually practiced such artificial deformation, the reasoning is consistently indicated to be that such deformation is used as an indication of status, distinguishment, and nobility. So this would then seem to be a rather open and shut case. This is a bizarre ritualistic practice related to dynamics of social status. There's simply no need to bring in aliens or anything else bizarre into the narrative. But this explanation, though certainly true at least in part, leaves an enormous question hanging. Why would so many different cultures from around the globe, cultures which supposedly came to develop in near complete isolation from one another, come to develop this exact same dangerous, difficult, and oddly specific practice? And why would this practice have the exact same cultural significance throughout all of these disparate cultures throughout the world and throughout history? Furthermore, some researchers who have studied such cranial deformations claim that not all examples can be explained as being a result of physical intervention. Some elongated skulls display characteristics which strongly suggest that their abnormality was a result of natural physiology rather than intentional binding or other such artificial methods of achieving such a form. It seems to me that there is something missing in the commonly accepted explanation. Thus far, we've conjectured the possibility that ancient peoples may have been able to interact with the morphogenetic strata of reality in a manner which could allow for direct interactions with the consciousness of animals, as well as direct manipulation of physical and physiological aspects of both mineral and biological entities. Looking upon the evidence presented by these cranial deformations through such a framework, we might then venture a more cohesive and adequate explanation for these anomalies. Perhaps such abnormalities were artificially created in much the same way and associated with nobility throughout such various cultures, because such an association in fact stems from a much earlier stage of humanity, in which such morphology was created by a kind of priestly nobility, a class of shaman oligarchs, as it were, who were capable of manipulating their own physiology so as to distinguish themselves from the lower castes of commoners or slaves. Perhaps it was precisely this caste of shaman oligarchs which possessed the secrets of creating the megalithic structures throughout the world which we now find to be so utterly inexplicable.
Okay, so he mentions there that why would so many different cultures from around the world who have no way of contacting each other all be doing these same things at the same time? And binding was seen as a status. So I did a little peeky peek because I have some ideas on these things as well. So I'm gonna share. Yeah. Oh, give me just. I'm so sorry. I did not think this through when I started this. Okay. All right. Now I can do it. Okay. So I want to share my screen and show just a couple little articles that I pulled out here. Okay. see. Bear with me. Thank you for bearing with me. Okay, this was a very interesting one that I found. I'm gonna do it as a separate, all by itself, just because that's really interesting. But here, I also want to point out to this about what our standards of childcare compared to other cultures around the world. And this is really interesting because this goes into a business trying to sell diapers and running into a problem. And then, of course, that problem then led them, onto some research and found some interesting things. So, culture could have a big impact in these things, which he does mention. But as far as the idea, the phenomenon of multiple discovery, this is one of the terms for it. They have another term. I can't think of another one. The other one, but there is the phenomenon of multiple discoveries. Okay, and this is the article that it's referring to from there. November 25th of 2012, Are Inventions Inevitable? Simultaneous Invention and the Incremental Nature of Discovery. Thomas Edison invented the light bulb in 1979. What if he had never been born? Would we still have light bulbs? And would there still have been invented in 1879? It turns out that this is not just a philosophical question, and the answer is yes. The light bulb would have been invented at roughly the same time. And we know this because at least 23 other people built prototype light bulbs before Edison, including 2 groups who filed patents and fought legal battles with him over the rights. And this is not a strange coincidence that happens with electric lighting. It is the norm in both technological invention and scientific and mathematical discovery. Newton and Leibniz, maybe that's how it is. Leibniz, I don't know. They independently invented calculus. Alexander Graham Bell and Elisha Gray both filed a patent for the telephone on the same day within 3 hours of each other. And sunspots were simultaneously discovered by 4 scientists living in 4 different countries. The list of simultaneous independent inventions includes the airplane, 2 people, the steamboat, 5 people, photography, 2 people, the telegraph, 5 people, and the telescope, 9 people. In science and math, it includes decimal fractions, 2 people, the theory of natural selection, 2 people, the discovery of oxygen, 2 people, molecular theory, 2 people, and the conservation of energy, 4 people. So, and that's just the ones we know. What happens here is that in the meaning of life theory, it states that as a collective, we are developing much the same way we do as an independent. In other words, our developmental understanding of the world around us happens in a collective basis. So if we take things like the telephone, and we make that maybe say throwing a ball, liken these 2 things together. We're going to have children throwing balls all around the world, roughly around the same time. And you can't say, well, one is throwing, how do you explain the other? Well, because it's just a normal pattern of our understanding about the world and the world around us. And interestingly to note, if you'll come back and let me read this article here, when I read this one in its fullness, you're going to see some interesting patterns playing out there with the language and mobility working side by side. And I think that's what we're looking at when we're, that's another one, when we're looking at discovery. So when we're saying that there's babies all across the world, or there's humans all across the world having specific behaviors, this is why, because it's a developmental thing that happens to us naturally, and we can't help it. It doesn't matter where we are. We're going to do roughly the same things around the same time. There's always going to be more than one. And so I think that's important to keep that in mind when looking at the theory of multiple discoveries. Now, when I go back, I'll do another video here in a minute, and I'm going to look at that binding of the head, and we're going to compare that to the article that about the culture of binding in general and how children develop. That was it for this. So I'll have more as I go along. Thank you.